Bill 458, I described this at the last voting session a little bit. But as amended, the bill requires a local jurisdiction to have specified policies, ordinances, or park rules that best address best practices of ethical behavior for visitors to parks and natural areas. As amended, it applies to county parks. You may remember when it came in, it dealt with program open space and was a program open space requirement. Amendments took it out of that from the natural resources article, put it into the local article.
Is it also municipal or is it just county?
Just county.
Have we moved the amendments yet? I can't remember.
I have moved the amendments.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the amendments? Will, are you talking on the amendments or the bill?
Well, one and the same. The amendment is the bill.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, go ahead. You're right.
Thank you. So where do I find best practices of ethical behavior? What book is that in?
Oh, it's the autobiography of Will Wyville. That's right.
Well, beside that, I mean, it seems kind of generic. Is it intentionally that broad or what?
What it asks to do is for each county to come up with a policy for visitors to parks, for behavior and best use of parks. And so there's no like specific item that we're looking for. It also asks the counties to let the park visitors know how best to use parks.
But my interpretation
Sure.
of best practices could be totally different than yours. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
May I add a detail about?
Sure, Kristen.
There is additional information that's included in the amendment. It's actually similar to the bill as introduced, but there's a prescriptive list of information that needs to be included in these policies. And that will include information on how visitors can limit damage to natural areas, limit pollution, limit disturbance of wildlife.
Yeah, but that's all part two. Part one is to address the best practice of ethical behavior, and part two is all those items you just mentioned. So I understand the second part of the bill. The first part, I don't.
Yeah, if the language has been redrafted, that they are read together, that the policies address best practices and include that information, that type of information.
I guess,
I mean, the way I read it, it says and, so it tells me you've got to adopt best practices and then section 2 adopt those.
You know, right now, Delegate, I'm having trouble finding the actual, I have the floor report, but I don't have the actual language in front of me.
Oh, well, I'm looking at the amendment you all just distributed last.
And so your question is on the first part where,
Yeah, the question on the first part where it says that each local jurisdiction must adopt policies, ordinances, or park rules that address best practices of ethical behavior and include information on how visitors can limit damage, limit pollution, limit disturbance of wildlife, etc.
they're not defined terms, if that's what you're looking for. They're not defined terms. So if you look up the dictionary definition of ethical, and it would say a best practices for good use.
So what are the penalties then for someone if they're not a defined term? Are there penalties associated with someone who's not complying with this?
There are no penalties associated with this bill.
Nor in the section that it's being adopted in?
Kristen?
No, this has been drafted to a miscellaneous subtitle in the local government article, and there's no penalties that apply.
Will, do you mind if I cut in on your questioning to ask a
Certainly, go ahead.
aspect of you still have the floor. So this ethical behavior language, where did that originate?
Mr. Chairman, that was in the bill as it was brought in. The term.
So if we were to get, well, let me propose this. What if altered the amendment to get rid of the words ethical behavior and just said address best practices for visitors to parks and natural areas? Would that do it without having us to have to decide what unethical park behavior would be? I'm not sure the word ethical really is appropriate in this kind of a bill. What do you think?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're suggesting?
Getting rid of the words of ethical behavior so that what would remain would be address best practices for visitors to parks and natural areas.
Delegate Weigel, does that take care of your issue?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I see there's some other hands up.
Yeah. Let me get to them before we complete this thought. Let me go to, I think the order would have been Healy, Love, and Stein. And, oh, no, I'm sorry, Jalisi was first. Jalisi, Healy, Love, Stein, like that. So Jay, your hand was up first.
Yeah, my concern, thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is the same, what I assume is Delegate Weigels, which is ethical standard may be different in different jurisdictions. And we are asking for the county governments to come up with a plan of what they would be considering as ethical conduct. And then I think there was part of it was, and maybe that's taken out in the amendment, is they also have to keep a track of it and then report it in a certain fashion. I just think it's very difficult. I mean, me having lived in different cultures, what is okay in one jurisdiction or one area may not be acceptable behavior in the second location. So I think what your suggestion is good, that if we just get rid of ethical conduct, that would leave what is normal, taking care of the parks and not destroying them kind of language would make more sense.
Okay, let me go on to Healy, Love, Stein, and Lehman in that order. Healy?
Thank you very much. I just, along the same lines, I think that actually proposal it helps a lot. I think what's attempted here is that you want everybody to post something in the parks to say this, things like don't walk on the grass and don't, whatever behaviors you want to be in the park that will respect others and the property and nature. And it's just leaving it to the locals to come up with whatever the list is that makes sense in that jurisdiction. And if you leave the ethical language out of it, I think that's a charged term that's going to draw unnecessary attention to something that is really just a practical thing. So I agree.
Okay. Love, Stein, Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too appreciate the taking out of ethical behavior. I guess I'm just trying to figure out, I'm pulling up actually right now the Maryland National Parks website, and they already have, prohibited activities and conduct on their website. So, they already talk about this. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, I know we have more people using the parks, and I know we want people to use good behavior, but this bill seems, I appreciate the work of the subcommittee, but to me, it still seems to be going a little bit too far in terms of government prescription, exercise trail courtesy, including by adopting proper yielding practices. I'm just a little concerned that this goes a little too far.
Sarah, we're going to make a conservative of you yet. Delegate Stein.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree taking out the phrase ethical behavior makes sense. My understanding is the sponsor was referring to the specific practices enumerated before when she was using that term ethical behavior, but not hurting wildlife, staying on trails, et cetera. But I agree it makes sense to avoid confusion, take out that phrase ethical behavior.
Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the question was raised in the subcommittee about, the need for this, where as a statewide standard, because you do have different entities running parks, and in Prince George's and Montgomery, it's Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, which is very well known for not just having rules, but posting them publicly in very visible places. In some cases, there are fines associated, but my understanding is that the sponsor is trying to promote all around better stewardship. And I guess I would agree that ethical would be problematic. I think if we can, somehow emphasize stewardship. I think there were issues during, I spoke to her about this, and there were issues during the pandemic, not just with increased use, but folks not sharing trails properly and not stepping to the side for other people. And there were some confrontations. I think, she was well-intentioned with ethical, but I would agree that it's not quite the right word to use. So I don't know if there's a way to emphasize stewardship if it's not already emphasized. And
I don't know. I actually think best practices covers it. I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna skip over. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Mary.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one other thing, which is what came out when Delegate Guyton's staff was in on subcommittee. He pointed out that it's almost half of the counties in the state don't have rules for their parks. That issue, I was surprised. I'll speak for myself, but so there is a need for this for sure. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Delegate Ruth and then Jalisi, and then I have an amendment to offer that I hope we can vote on. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually was Delegate Lehman made my point for me that in subcommittee, it did come out that there were quite a few counties that don't even have any kind of park policy. And so I do think that this is a good bill and needed. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Jalisi, and then I'm gonna offer an amendment and we'll vote on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my other concern was when I read the word monitoring of whatever conduct we're talking about and then reporting it. Is that, just for my clarification, is that DNR that is supposed to be doing it now that we have counties taking care of this issue? Who's going to be reporting it to whom of this conduct?
This bill applies to local jurisdictions, which
Right.
is defined as a county or the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And I will say, and I appreciate the discussion, I will say this language was worked out with the Maryland Association of Counties.
My question was, who's going to be reporting to whom? Because the initial bill said, yeah, go ahead.
This does not include Department of Natural Resources or the state. This is local counties will be handling it.
Okay.
So the park.
Let me offer an amendment. Let me offer an amendment, and then we can discuss other aspects here. I would like to amend the language in part, there are no line numbers here, but the sentence that says address best practices of ethical behavior, I would like to remove the words of ethical behavior. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on, well, I guess we've been doing nothing but discussing that. We'll proceed to a vote on the removal of those three words. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, all right, so those three words were removed. Let me go now to, well, it's going to be the following order: Lehman, Parrott.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Otto, Jalisi. Lehman, or did you?
No, I'm good.
Okay,
Thank you.
Parrott. Neil Parrott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my question's or just the big picture. I'm not sure what the problem is that we're trying to solve. I do know that there are some parks that don't have official rules. But was there an incident or something that drove us to make us have this bill? And it seems to like regular laws would cover the majority of what we say is decent behavior inside a park, like no littering. That's already a law. So I don't know if anybody can answer those questions.
We did receive, both at the hearing and in subcommittee, information that a lot of counties do not have best practices at their parks. And so what we did was we asked the sponsor to work with MACO, and I believe, and Vice Chair Stein was involved to work out something that was acceptable to all the parties. And this is what we got. And we want to have counties have basic best practices in place for how people should treat their parks.
Thank you. It sounds like there wasn't any incident that drove this bill.
No.
There was.
Yeah, there was.
There was.
Mhm.
I think something came up at the hearing, but I forget what it was.
Okay, let me go to Delegate Boyce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just a quick question. How does this affect those parks, state parks and parks that already have rules in place? Would this just not affect them, or would this make them revise what they have?
And this does not apply to state parks at all.
No state parks, but for
So county parks and Park and Planning Commission parks, if they already have rules that meet this, then they don't have to do anything.
Okay, and that includes the city too, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Otto. Charles.
I moved. My position moved. I was trying to hit the wrong button.
I just move you around just to confuse you, Charles.
One thing, I just heard something different. You said it did, Chairman Gilchrist, you did say that it applied to municipalities just now to the last question. And you said before that it didn't apply but to the counties.
The bill does not apply to municipalities. It applies local jurisdiction defined as a county or the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission.
I mean, does that include Baltimore City, which is both a municipality and county in effect?
I might ask Kristen, but my understanding that in the code, county does apply to Baltimore City.
It's defined in the local government article. Yes, a county includes Baltimore City.
So what are you asking them to do right now with this bill, with it is amended?
Under this bill, as amended, local jurisdictions, it requires a local jurisdiction to have specified policies or park rules that address best practices for visitors to parks and natural areas. A local jurisdiction must also have a plan for sharing these policies with the public.
Well, that's all well and good in most of mine, but our people believe in live and let live, and they know what ethical behavior or whatever you want to call it is, and we don't have to spell it out on a billboard. I think as Delegate Parrott had mentioned, it's already covered by local laws, and it's probably going to be the sheriff's department in our jurisdictions to do it. And it's a shame if you got to dictate on a billboard outside a park to distract from the natural resources of how you need to behave while you're in there. So I think we got a bill here that's looking for a problem that doesn't exist, and the local authorities ought to be able to take care of it. Isn't that so?
Yes, apparently it is. Well, no, you don't have to ask a question. We're not in a public hearing. You can express an opinion. I'm going to skip over Jay because he's spoken a lot. I will get back to you, but Delegate Ruth and Love in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to address the question of was there an incident that provoked this, and my understanding is that there were issues in a park in the sponsor's district where during the pandemic, maybe a lot of people went to a park that didn't normally go to parks and may not be aware of normal park courtesy, and it caused significant conflict with the community. And so to the question of local authorities, I believe this bill is not intended to put people in contact with the criminal justice system, but rather to create a way to communicate with people coming to the park what's expected of them in a park. And so to avoid having to deal with local authorities, having to arrest people for, whatever. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Love, Jalisi, and then we will vote.
Thank
Because
you.
we do
Mr.
have other bills.
Do we have these rules for our state parks?
I don't know. This bill does not apply to state parks.
No, I understand that. I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't know.
Does council?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Jalisi, then Clark, then we're going to vote.
I was just following up on Delegate Love's previous comment that it seems like we already have this this code of conduct, if you will, for people who use parks. And I think one of the delegates also mentioned there's a penalty for littering and all that. So I'm not sure, is there something additional we are achieving through this bill which we don't already have, which if had been implemented in Delegate Guyton's district when that incident happened would have taken care of it at that time? Are we achieving something more than what we already have, which Delegate Love read off of her computer?
These practices, I mean, we're leaving it up to the counties to do. And there's some guidance here in the bill asking for certain provisions. The counties will have wide latitude with how to implement this.
No, what I meant was, is this going
You know what?
above and beyond what we have?
Hold on. We're going to hold this bill. Let's go to House Bill 52.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was my next question.
House Bill 52. Marvin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 52. I'm going to read a brief explanation of what the bill does. And I appreciate the subcommittee's time in going through this bill 2 days in a row.
And by the way, this is a bill where judiciary is primary, we're secondary. Go ahead.
That is correct. HB 52 extends the time between the filing of a failure to pay rent case and the hearing to 7 days. Currently, it's 5 days. It also requires that before filing a failure to pay rent action, a landlord deliver a certain notice to the tenant, and the notice must be delivered 7 days before filing a failure to pay rent action. The bill also, a complaint for repossession filed in accordance with the failure to pay rent law shall include a statement that affirms and states the date that the landlord delivered the notice required by this act. It also authorizes the tenant to challenge assertions made by a landlord with regarding to delivery of the notice. The bill also requires surrender of the premises within 7 days following court order in a failure to pay the rent action. And that 7 days also is a change from the previous 5 days. It now goes to 7 days. It also authorizes the court to order an emergency stay of execution of a certain warrant of motion presented on a motion presenting evidence that eviction of the tenant would endanger the health or life of the tenant or other occupants on the premises. And I don't have a list of all of the amendments, Mr. Chair, but that is primarily what the bill does as amended. And because I don't have a specific list of all of the amendments, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the bill as amended from the subcommittee, Mr. Chair.
Second. Okay. Jay, do you still have your hand up from the last bill or?
No, sir, this is for this bill.
Okay, go ahead.
So just for my clarification, so what it's saying is, if I am the landlord, I have to wait 7 days after the rent is late before I file the failure to pay rent notice. And then it is 7 days after the judgment is given in the rent court. Now I need to wait 7 days before I file the restitution of notice in the court, or that has been taken out and it's just 7 days after the court rules in my favor for a tenant who's not paid rent.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So before you can file, you have to provide a notice. And the notice that you have to provide is very specific in its content. And you have to provide the notice that you intend to file. And you have to do that 7 days before you file.
So then if my lease already says that it would be filed, then that's not enough. I have to give them a written notice. And is there a prescription on how that notice needs to be delivered to the tenant? Because most leases say that you can just hand deliver it.
Yes, the bill is very specific in, well, the bill says a written notice required delivered by first-class mail affixed to the door of the premises, or if elected by the tenant, electronic delivery of the form in email message or text message.
And it has to be two of those four things, right? Is that what the law says?
It says, or, I'm sorry, you are correct, Mr. Chair. At least two of the methods, that is correct. At least two of the methods that I described above, yes.
And then once the landlord gets the judgment, then there was another thing you mentioned of a 7-day wait, and I guess I couldn't understand it properly.
Yeah, it requires a surrender of the premises within 7 days following the court order of the failure to pay rent. So that's, because currently, after you get your notice from the court, the current law says after you get your notice, you wait 4 days, and after 4 days, and you file with the sheriff's department to get your notice to the sheriff's department. This says instead of 4 days, now it's 7 days.
So then is the landlord still required to file the warrant of restitution after getting the judgment from the rent court, or is this in lieu of filing the warrant of restitution?
Not in lieu.
Not in lieu.
Right.
So and then if this bill is passed, then this 7 days is going to be for all jurisdictions, including Baltimore City, where it is more than 7 days, right?
That is correct. Matthew, can you chime in? I do believe this is going to be a statewide bill where all jurisdictions are on the same. Matthew?
Yes, so there were no changes that I see that were made to Baltimore City specific law. This is affecting the provisions in state law with regard to 8401. So
the answer is yes, then it's going to be reduced in Baltimore City. It might go up by a day or two in Baltimore County, right?
Yes, sir.
That's the way it sounds.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Delegate
thank you very
Love,
much.
I'm sorry, Delegate Judge, I didn't mean to cut you off. Are you complete?
No. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Delegate Love?
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am
Chair
looking
squared.
at an email from Molly Amster at Jews United for Justice. Mr. Chair Barve, I see that you are on this. I don't know if Mr. Chair Holmes, have you seen this? Because there are some technical things they raise in here.
Delegate Love, I understand that the Speaker's office is working with the Judiciary Committee for a possible friendly amendment on the floor of the House.
Okay, great, thank you.
So
Okay.
any additional questions? The bill has been properly moved and seconded as amended. All in favor, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, am I supposed to do this? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
That's okay. I won't like sign over part of my paycheck to you.
I'm sorry. I get into this mode and I just.
I know, no,
The
it's good. I
subcommittee
love it.
chair knows when I get into this mode, get out the way.
You're in the zone. You're in the zone.
Yep.
Right. Bill's before us. Have we voted on the amendment yet? Or where it's before us as amended?
As amended. The
Right.
bill as amended.
Okay, the bill is amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion before we vote?
Mr. Chair, can I,
Sure.
do I need to raise my, no? So I was just, since you mentioned the amendment, which might be coming from the speaker's office on the floor, if you knew, is that going to change any of the material facts which Chair Holmes just explained?
Well, my understanding is it's going to have bearing upon the aspects of the bill that have more to have to do with the Judiciary Committee subject matter, not things that are more ENT Committee subject matter. I mean, after all, I don't know what the legal services agency is. I don't know any. I'm not a lawyer, and I've never. I don't, legal aid and these things are very confusing to me. I'm just a frozen caveman, frozen accountant. I don't know these legalistic things. So I understand that if there's a friendly amendment, it will be on those parts of the bill to do with the Judiciary Committee subject matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Trish? Roll call.
Vice Chair Stein,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Fraser Hidalgo,
Yes.
Otto,
Charles?
No.
Jacobs,
No.
Weibel,
Make it 3, no.
Lamprey,
Yes.
Silberty,
You're muted, Barry. You're muted.
Not anymore. No.
Wells,
Yes.
Love,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Trasta,
Yes.
Parrot,
No.
Boyce,
Yes.
Clark,
No.
Jalisi,
I'd like to abstain.
Okay.
Denied.
and Anderson,
No.
Gilchrist,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman votes yes. And I like Cornbread's Children of the Corn backdrop there. Very scary. Okay. House Bill 13. Marvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And before I go on to 1312, I just want to thank again Delegate Wells, as I did in the subcommittee. Delegate Wells is the sponsor of this very complicated bill that we started out with. And I just want to
52, you
thank
mean? 52, you mean?
52, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank Delegate Wells for her inspiration in this bill. Now going on to 1312. And again, Mr. Chair, as I did with HB 52, I am going to be moving the bill as amended, HB 1312 as amended. And the bill requires the judiciary, as opposed to the sheriff's office, to collect, compile, maintain, and publish biweekly on the judiciary website data on evictions, and requires an annual report on evictions data to the governor and the General Assembly and the first report is due on October 31st, 2022. The bill also codifies the governor's executive order as when it applies to catastrophic health emergencies. The bill applies to the conditions of the governor's executive order adopted into law as by this act for 3 months after the executive order that lasts 60 to 179 days, and 6 months after the executive order ends for at least 180 days. Additionally, the court may not issue any judgment for possession or repossession or warrant of restitution of possession or repossession of a residential property if the tenant can demonstrate to the court that through documentation or other objectively verifiable means that the tenant has suffered a substantial loss of income and the alleged breach of lease.
Like go on Zoom? Yeah.
Somebody needs
Sorry.
to mute themselves somewhere. Brooke.
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
Yeah, it gets boring to me sometimes too. It also provides that during the term of the executive order, the landlord may not increase the rent payment of a tenant or charge the tenant a fine or fee for non-payment of late payment or court costs not awarded by the court. And again, Mr. Chair, this is jointly assigned to Judiciary and ENT, and we are not the primary. Judiciary is the primary. So, Mr. Chair, I would like to move the bill as amended.
Second.
And there's a second. Delegate Jalisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is just very simple. Is this bill going to be applied to only single family homes and properties with 4 or less units? Because you're codifying the governor's executive order, which only applies to this and not to bigger multifamily properties.
Well,
so is that what this bill is going to be dealing with? And all this is only limited to property with 1 to 4 units?
Matthew, if you could assist me with this, it says residential, and sometimes residential means 4 or less, and it goes into a commercial definition after that. Matthew, can you expand upon that, please, if you don't mind?
Can I add?
No, let's let Matthew answer, and then you can go back to you.
Okay. So I'm in my familiarity with the governor's executive order, there is no limit on the application to certain unit types. It's applying to repossession or possession for under failure to pay rent cases and breach of lease cases generally, without regard to a number of units or a number of particular building types.
And I'm looking at the bill now, and there is no, as Matthew indicated, there is no differentiation between number of units. It just says that the subtitle applies only to residential leases, and that's it.
And I understand that, but I had the Attorney General's opinion just this morning about what is a residential property. And a residential property is only a property with 1 to 4 units. And if you look at the governor's executive order of December 17th, it specifies a specific portion of the real property article, which only applies to properties which are 1 to 4 units. And I talked to the Attorney General, and I have it, they emailed me a response which said that this only applies to residential properties, which are 1 to 4 units. So if you're codifying his order, then that is going to be only limiting to those properties and not to bigger properties with 5 or more units.
Well, it appears that the bill, as it came out of Judiciary, doesn't make a distinction between larger and smaller properties. Is that correct, Mark?
That is correct. The bill specifically states this subtitle applies only to residential leases. And if Delegate Jalisi has received some type of definition from the Attorney General's office, I would suggest then that the definition that Delegate Jalisi has received replies to the wording here, which says applies only to residential leases.
Right, and the definition of residential property is what is the issue here. Residential property, including what is mentioned in the governor's executive order, is 1 to 4 units. All other properties, bigger properties, multifamily, 5 or more, are considered commercial properties. And I think you're not addressing commercial properties.
Well, thank you, Delegate. I appreciate your explanation. And
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have a motion. I'm sorry. That is the report that the Housing Real Property Subcommittee is giving to the full committee, a favorable report on the amendments and the bill combined, Mr. Chair.
I can't remember, did we have the motion and was it seconded?
Yes. I second.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Delegate Otto has a question or debate.
Well, yes, I find it difficult right now to vote on this bill with this confusion on who it pertains to. It pertains to a 200
I think it's,
unit property
well, Charles,
or a 4 unit.
I think it applies to everybody. I don't think there are any exceptions.
Well, that don't make it any better.
Somehow I thought that might be your reaction, yeah.
I move the bill, Mr. Chair.
Second again.
Roll call.
You're muted, Trish. Thank you.
Vice Chair Stein,
Yes.
Holmes,
Yes.
Learman,
Yes.
Fraser Hidalgo,
Yes.
Otto,
No.
Jacobs,
No.
Weibel,
On with Otto and Jacobs, no.
Lamprey,
Yes.
Silberty,
No.
Wells,
Yes.
Love,
Yes.
Ruth,
Yes.
Stewart,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Harrison,
Yes.
Tarassa,
Yes.
Parrot,
No.
Boyce,
Yes.
Clark,
Jerry?
No.
Jalisi,
No.
Anderton,
No.
Gilchrist,
Yes.
Healy,
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. What's the, could you give us the margin on that, Trish?
16-8.
Okay.
We're
Mr. Chair, if I could just take a moment, I want to thank again the Housing and Real Property Subcommittee for their indulgence in my discussions with them on these two bills. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All righty then. I think that's it. We're done here, and I'll see you on the House floor in 20 minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Oh, do you have an
Could I-
announcement?
an
Yeah.
announcement or a correction from the last voting session. On House Bill 507, the Clean Water Commerce Act, during the discussion, Delegate Jacobs asked whether projects to address pollution from the Conowingo Dam could be, or those types of projects would be eligible for funding under the Clean Water Commerce Act. I consulted with advocates who at the time believed the answer was no. They've since done more research and the answer is yes. Projects from Conowingo would be eligible to apply for funding under the Clean Water Commerce Act. So just wanted to do that clarification.
Well, that's a nice little shiny ray of sunshine, isn't it?
Oh, is there a leadership meeting today?
No, there's no leadership meeting today. We'll be meeting tomorrow. We're going to have a long floor session. So I'm going to let you go home, eat a meal, and, do hard drugs and go to sleep. So in my case, it's Benadryl. So any other announcements from subcommittee chairs? Dave? Yeah.
Motor Vehicle Subcommittees, we're planning on meeting tomorrow after our ENT bill hearings.
Yeah, and so, everybody look out in your emails for any last minute changes. We're obviously gonna have to be playing things by ear to schedule around multiple floor sessions and everything, so.
Land use will be meeting tomorrow before our hearings,
Okay, what time is that would be?
12:30.
12:30, okay. Any other announcements of subcommittee chairs? Okay, that's it. Good work, people. See you on the floor. If you go to the floor in 15 minutes, take care.